Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Kevin Lau here for another whiteboard fireside chat. Today, we're going to be talking about this age-old question: should I own my age in bonds? So, if you're, let's say, 55, 60 years old, you're approaching retirement, you're approaching that end game. End game as in your end working game and the beginning of a new chapter, beginning your retirement chapter. And oftentimes, the question we receive from clients is, hey, should I be getting more conservative now as I approach retirement? And then what should that look like throughout retirement? So essentially, the issue we're going to address today is this issue of getting too conservative too early. Okay. And so I'm going to go to my whiteboard here. I've got a question lined up here on the whiteboard. Should I own my age in bonds? So let's say hypothetically you're 60 years old. All right. So if you're 60 years old, on the fixed income side, you would have 60% in fixed income, or FI. And then on the equity side, you would then have 40% in equities. Okay. So if this is your portfolio asset allocation, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is what that rule of thumb is going to tell you is, hey, if you're 60 years old, 60% of your portfolio should be in fixed income. The problem was with that is you have a few different risks that you're bringing into the table. Okay, so it's just by design, just because you're being more conservative doesn't mean that you're eliminating risk. So the first risk I would throw in there is inflation. This has been the biggie. Over the last 2 to 3 years, inflation's been running hot, upwards of 9.1%. Okay, now it's trickling down. All right, it's just, it just creeped below 3% for the first time in a few years. So great, it's trending in the right direction. But inflation is now embedded into our economy. So it's not like prices are going to go down unless we had deflation. And we don't want that. You don't want that. But we have inflation risk. Number two, you've got interest rate risk. That means if interest rates do fall over time, the reinvestment of that fixed income that is then maturing, let's say it's in a year, 2 years down the road. Let's say hypothetically you have a bond that's paying you 4% now, and that bond matures in 2 years. Well, in 2 years, do you feel like rates are going to be lower or higher than they are today? Most people are betting that rates are going down. I just received a quote for a single premium immediate annuity for a client. We don't sell annuities, FYI, but I received it for a client, and the interest rates are going down already in SPIAs. Okay, and that just shows you they're looking forward and they're assuming that interest rates are going down. You're going to see that with CDs, money market accounts going forward. This is why I try to urge you, don't chase short-term rates. Short-term rates, of course, if it's for short-term money, great. If you're looking at, let's say you're transitioning to a retirement home in the next few years, you need a large lump sum for a down payment. Of course, pile that money into a money market account or a 1 year CD, something short term. Maybe it's a 1 year treasury. Okay. But if it's longer term money, you've got this interest rate risk and this reinvestment risk where if interest rates fall, which that's the expectation, now you have to reinvest that money at then lower interest rates. So you bring that into the equation more with fixed income. And then the third one is the biggie: longevity. Okay. The only asset class that is going to really truly beat out inflation over the long term is the equity markets, the stock markets. Okay, sure, you could say real estate, but I'm not talking about real estate investing on this podcast or in this whiteboard fireside chat. I am talking about your traditional retiree who's been building up savings inside of a 401k, inside of a Roth account, maybe a taxable brokerage account, maybe HSAs. They want to know what spread they should have between equities and fixed income. And what I'm saying is if you follow this advice on own your age in bonds, you bring these risks into the equation. And I'm not saying that you can't live with those risks. I'm not saying that you can't survive on this rule of thumb, this 40-60 allocation if you are 60, but I'm telling you, if you do this strategy, you're going to be bringing other risks into the equation. Not as much market volatility on the stock side because now you're in 40% in stocks, but you're going to bring other risks into the equation. Okay, but let me just show you, let me break down this example, how real life works. All right, so you've got, let's say you're 60 years old. You're feeling pretty good. You're like, hey, the next 5 years, I'm going to be coasting to retirement. You've already saved a nice little nest egg. Maybe you've already saved $1 million or $1.5 million or even $2 million bucks at 60 years old. You're feeling pretty good. Maybe if you're sitting there on a $2 million portfolio, maybe you could retire now. Maybe you're work optional at this point, but you just kind of like what you do. And maybe you just want to bridge yourself to get to Medicare eligibility, which is age 65. But ultimately, let's say that's your retirement date. Okay, so you've got 5 years. So traditional thinking would be, hey, get more conservative, get more defensive the closer you get to retirement, because what if the market drops? What if the market goes down substantially? Okay, during that first year of retirement or that second year of retirement. Okay, my question for them is, how much of your portfolio are you drawing down in that first year of retirement? Is it 100% of your portfolio? The answer is probably no. I mean, I hope not, unless you have like terminal cancer and you're like, I'm just going to take it all out and just go crazy. But most likely, you're going to draw a certain percentage. Maybe it is the 4% rule. Maybe it's 5%. Maybe it's 6%. If you kind of been following what we're talking about, sort of looking at this idea of guardrails, in terms of income distributions. Maybe you're taking out 6% a year, or maybe even closer to 7% a year. That's acceptable too for a period of time, and we'll show you why in a second. But the answer, it's not 100% of your portfolio that you're going to need in that first year. So why would you have 100% of your portfolio aligned with the time horizon of 5 years? That's what I'm talking about here. Okay. And then on the flip side, okay, now we've got this age highlighted here. Okay. Now we've got age 70 highlighted. Okay. What's age 70 for some? Max Social Security. Okay. So if you were drawing, let's say 5% or 6% or even 7% a year, you sort of know in the back of your mind, hey, that's only going to last for maybe 5 years. To get me from 65 to 70, I'm only going to need to take out 7% a year. And then once I get Social Security, once I get the maximum benefit, maybe that's paying you 50 grand a year. And now all of a sudden, instead of needing 7%, maybe now you need 2% of your portfolio. Okay, so now that rate of withdrawal drops significantly, during that Social Security phase from age 70 to 75. Well, then what happens at 75? I've highlighted that because that's when required minimum distributions kick in, RMDs, everyone's favorite distribution. So the tax man they want to get paid, the IRS, this is the year in which you're going to be forced to take out distributions from all of those tax deferred retirement accounts, traditional IRAs, traditional 401ks, TSPs, et cetera, et cetera. And so at that point in time, regardless if you need 2% or 6% or 5% or 4%, you're going to have to take out those RMDs. And sometimes that RMD could really increase your taxes. Okay, that could make your taxes go up substantially, and potentially that might make you pay more tax on Social Security. It might put you into a different tax bracket. It might subject you to IRMA, which we've talked about before, income related monthly adjustment amount. So just be careful with that. But the point I'm saying is, on this one, is that there could be a period of time where you're drawing a little bit more from your portfolio, and then the need drops a little bit at age 70 or whenever you start claiming Social Security, or maybe it's a pension, but it could ramp back up regardless if you need it or not in order to satisfy these RMDs. And so what I'm telling you on this one, I know that this is not what that podcast, this whiteboard fireside chat is about, but what I'm saying is, come up with a plan. If you've got a bunch of money in a tax deferred account, IRA, 401k, 403b, come up with a Roth conversion strategy. Does it make sense for you to start doing some conversions, during this phase here from age, let's say from age 65 to 75? That's a 10-year window in which you're not required to take out anything. And so maybe you look at some Roth conversions. Maybe you look at taking some of those tax deferred dollars and converting those into tax-free dollars for later on in retirement, and to minimize the impact of those requirement minimum distributions. And then over here, I've highlighted age 90 because ultimately, life expectancy for someone at 60 years old, if you're 60 today, the average life expectancy is going to be age 82 for males and 84 for females. But there's a pretty good chance, upwards of 30%, that you might live until age 90. Okay, so if you've got this 30-year time horizon, okay, we're looking at a 30-year time horizon from today up until when you're expected to, quote unquote, pass away. That's 30 years. You're telling me you can't take on a little bit of risk with some of your portfolio to protect against inflation, to protect against interest rate risk, to protect against longevity risk? This is exactly what I'm doing this for, okay? Because a lot of people have this conventional line of thinking, which is get more conservative the closer you get to retirement. And I'm going to talk about this concept of asset location in just a second, so stay with me here. But what does Vanguard say, all right? So this is actually a new client we're just starting to work with now. I think he's 65 actually. So he's 65 and he's about to retire. He's got about $1.2 million saved. He's coming to us and saying, hey, Kevin, here's my investment allocation. He's sitting at Vanguard. Here's my investment allocation now. Okay. Look at this model asset allocation for your age. So right now he's in a portfolio of about 67% in stocks, 32% in bonds and some change. All right. in my opinion, what a beautiful asset allocation, beautiful percentage distribution between stocks and bonds. You've got your kind of your traditional portfolio, which is 60-40. This is the most popular investment portfolio that I see amongst retirees. Even in our practice too, it's just kind of the way it works based on the risk tolerance and risk capacity conversation. That's the equation we want to weigh when we're designing the investment allocation. But look at this. Look what Vanguard is telling them. Obviously, this is not a recommendation. There is like an asterisk at the very bottom of the page, and it says, this is not advice. This is just guidance. But look what they're telling. Model asset allocation mix based on your age, 51% in stocks, 48%, or let's call it maybe 52% in stocks, 48% in bonds. So telling him to get more conservative given the fact that he's 65. They have no idea what his financial situation is. Okay. They don't know what his risk tolerance is. They don't know what his risk capacity is. Okay. And this is what I'm telling you. You're going to see this blanketed advice all over the place. Target date funds, investment advisors, the media, your friends down the street, your neighbors, they're all going to have this mindset. What I'm telling you, it's flat out wrong. Your financial situation is not the same as those other people. Okay. And so what do I mean by risk tolerance versus risk capacity? Let's hit on this right now. Okay. So maybe you're in a situation where you've saved up 2 million bucks, okay? And you're feeling pretty good. All right? And to get to $2 million, you've taken a lot of risk and you've kind of become accustomed to that. You're like, I know stocks go up, they go down. I don't care. It's just it is what it is. But maybe you've been in the accumulation phase and now you're sort of thinking, okay, now I'm on the decumulation phase. Now I'm in the distribution phase. And so that's kind of causing you to feel like maybe I should take on more risk because I'm not comfortable with seeing a big swing in my investment portfolio. I want to keep 2 million, and worst case scenario, maybe it drops to 1.75 million. If like in a worst case, not in a worst case scenario, but let's say the market corrected itself and, went down 10 or 15%. Okay. Very likely for that to happen, even in a balanced portfolio of 60% stocks, 40% fixed income. But maybe your risk tolerance says, you know what? I'm comfortable with the risk. Okay, maybe I don't want to go pedal to the metal anymore, but maybe I'm comfortable with, potentially an 80% allocation in stocks and 20% in fixed income. Okay, based on metrics that we have and stress testing, maybe that you're comfortable with that. Okay. And maybe because of the scenario we just went through, we were talking about, hey, someone in the beginning phase, maybe they're drawing a higher distribution than in later on. And then when you start Social Security, then it drops down to 2%. Maybe that's this client. And so in the beginning of retirement, maybe it's a higher percentage distribution, but later on it drops down. Well, guess what? If we only need 2% of a withdrawal on a portfolio, well, we could have a pretty bad year and probably earn 2% on interest income alone and dividends alone. So not even have to sell anything. So that tells me that this individual actually has the capacity to take on that kind of risk, to be more aggressive, okay, because of the fact that they've saved enough and they're not relying on a huge percentage of their portfolio. So they have the capacity and the risk tolerance to take on that kind of risk, okay? What about on the flip side? What if they do have the capacity? Okay, maybe the 2% rule is applicable to them. They don't need a huge percentage of their portfolio, but maybe market swings just make them super nervous. Or maybe you're married and maybe you're comfortable with it, but your spouse isn't, and your spouse is looking at the statements and all of a sudden, hey, we retired at 2 million, now we're at 1.6. What are you doing? You're a terrible portfolio manager. Well, listen, you might not have the tolerance for an 80-20 spread, even though you have the capacity to. Maybe your tolerance is more in line with a 60-40 split of stocks and bonds. Okay. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. But here's the other side of that coin. Maybe you do have the risk tolerance. Okay. Maybe you're like, you can tolerate a little bit of risk. Okay. But at the end of the day, maybe your portfolio distribution need, maybe that is 5% a year or 6% a year or 7% a year. Okay. So basically we can't mess this thing up. We've got to get it really dialed in. And so you may not really have the capacity to go ultra conservative, and you may not have the capacity to go really aggressive either, because too aggressive, we go through a downturn and all of a sudden, hey, we need the portfolio. What are we going to do if we're 100% in stocks? Or, hey, What if we're 100% in bonds and all of a sudden, now we have inflation creeping in. Now we have longevity creeping in. So you don't really have the capacity to be too conservative or too aggressive. We need to be spot on dialed in to this 60/40 portfolio. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about with regards to this risk tolerance versus risk capacity. Just because you have the tolerance for it doesn't mean you need to. Okay. So, for those of you that only need 2% of your portfolio, so you have the capacity and the risk tolerance to take on more risk if you wanted to. But you might just say to yourself, you know what, I've saved 2 million bucks. I don't need to take on this risk. I've been taking on risk for the last 20 to 30 years to get here. So you have the capacity, you've earned the right to dial back that risk. And maybe, you know what, being 40% in the stock market and 60% in bonds, so owning your age in bonds, maybe that's going to help you sleep like a baby, because this 60%, that represents $1.2 million of your $2 million portfolio in fixed income. All right. And that's going to make you sleep like a baby, because you're thinking, hey, you know what? If I need $100,000 for my portfolio each year, I have 12 years of my income needs in bonds. That makes me sleep well at night. And so ultimately, even though you have the tolerance to take on risk, you've done it in the past, you have the capacity to take on a lot of risk, you also have the capacity to take on less risk. You've earned that right. So again, customize your investment strategy based on these factors: your financial considerations, your objectives, legacy goals. If you want to maximize legacy to the next generation, you're 60 years old, you're like, hey, I only need 2% of my portfolio each year to live comfortably because I have Social Security and a pension. I'm going to leave this to my kids. Why are you investing for a 5-year time horizon or a 10-year time horizon? You should be actually investing for your kids' time horizon, if ultimately that is your goal. Okay. So hopefully this is helpful. And I see this time and time again. Cannot tell you how many times I've come across clients that are just retired or they're about to retire and they're working with an advisor. And this advisor has got them in this like cookie cutter model portfolio that's customized to their age, not their financial plan, not their goals, not their risk tolerance, not their risk capacity. And it's a disaster. So make sure you've got this dialed in, make sure it's buttoned up. If you have questions on this topic, just drop a note in the comments. I read them. I get emails. I don't have a ton of subs at this point. I think I have 11 subscribers. So help me out on that one. Subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone else that you think would find value. Share this with someone who's approaching retirement and would find this to be valuable. And make sure to subscribe to the podcast, the Planning for Retirement podcast, and then hang around the YouTube channel, because I'm going to be doing these fireside chats. I think I threw this number out there before, 2 a week. I could do these all day, every day. So, I'm going to record as many of these as I can. Topics that come about. The reason I came up with this one is because that new client we're bringing on sent us that Vanguard statement suggesting a 50-50 split. And I just thought, hey, I need to get this message out there because I've seen this time and time again. So again, hope you found it valuable. And until next time, this is Kevin Lau signing off.